Hey everyone, and welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to be reviewing the S.H. Griffith Hawk of Light from the series Berserk. Now this isn't the first time Griffith has had a posable figure at this scale, as Figma has previously had a swing at it. However, this is the first time that Griffith has been in this particular outfit, because the previous Griffith release was from the Band of the Hawk design, which is quite similar to this one, but it is different enough to warrant it being a completely different figure, and this is a new company tackling it, so it will have completely different articulation and style. Now, while the Guts figure looked amazing and played pretty weirdly, I hope that the Griffith is a bit better, so we will be looking at that today. Now, first things first, the box for Griffith is absolutely incredible. It is gigantic, it's got amazing artwork on it, and it doesn't even look like a posable figure belongs here, really. Much like the Guts figure, it has a drawn image on the front, and I believe it's based on the author's original artworks, and it does look really good. Here's Guts' box for comparison. You can see it's just super gigantic, it's almost insane, and that's because of one of Griffith's accessories. But spinning the box around, you can see it's got all the standard S.H.Figuarts bits and bobs, so promotional images all around the sides, as well as a bunch of promo images on the back, showing you what this figure can do. Now, taking him out of the box, you can see we get the Griffith figure, as well as a gigantic horse, a sword, some hilts, some extra faces, a few different hand options, as well as a different hair option. And he also has the sort of pull out behilt or behirt sheet in the back. I don't really know the correct pronunciation for it because it's been a very long time since I've watched Berserk. Now, taking a look at the accessories, Griffith comes with a lot as well as not much at all, and that's mainly because the horse takes up so much of it. But he does pretty much come with all the essentials for his character. But we will be going through that bit by bit. So, first up, here is Griffith out of the box and chucked on a display. He comes with his cape attached, so I've left that on him, and his back isn't as interesting as Guts's, whereas Guts's cape was hiding a lot of detail. Griffith's isn't really hiding anything. But you can see on the display he's looking quite good, very striking. The paintwork is absolutely fantastic. It is also quite counter to a lot of the current S.H.Figuarts line, where they have been using a lot less paint for a better playable figure, whereas this Griffith, they couldn't really do that because the metallic sheen of his armor is so integral to the look of his character that you really have no choice but to paint it. So all of the armor is painted, his hair is shaded. There is a noticeable cutoff between the top hair and bottom hair for like the shading, but it's not too bad in person. The face is all detailed nicely, all the little gold trims and extra paint details are all done very, very nicely. Everything is very clean, and that goes double for his gigantic horse. This is one solid piece, doesn't really move or anything like that. The sort of coat on top of the horse is a soft plastic, so that does bend around, but it doesn't really do anything because the figure itself is not posable. But all the sculpt work, paintwork on that horse is equally amazing. Here, Griffith is next to Guts, and the Guts is on a stand, but you can see that he stands just a tiny bit taller than Griffith. I don't know how accurate that is to Berserk. Again, it has been a very long time since I watched it. But you can sort of tell that even though the color contrast between the two is so stark, because Guts uses a lot of dark blacks and greys and Griffith uses a lot of whites and silvers, they do still look like they're from the same brand and from the same series, which is props to the sculptors and painters. They've captured pretty much every little detail of the figure, and I do think proportionally he does actually look better than the Guts, which is nice. And he even has little spurs on the back of his boots, which scare the crap out of me because I don't want them to break, but they are a bendable, flexible material, so there's at least that. And he can stand up on his own power quite easily, but I would still recommend a stand, especially for action poses. Much like Guts, the Griffith comes with a bendy wire in his cape, and the cape is a completely different style to the Guts's. One where it is thicker and it's sort of like a silken sort of material, but the bendy wire is quite nice. The cape feels a little bit heavier because of the material used, but it doesn't really hinder any of the movement. The only thing that really will hinder it is the back hair on Griffith's head, because that can press the cape down. Now, articulation is a little bit different to the guts. So he's got a ball joint at the head, which allows for decently free movement, but his hair can get in the way, and his head does pop off pretty easily. But he can look up that far, and you can also move the little strands of hair on either side of his head, as well as the back of his hair. His arms can move out that far without any sort of extra assistance. And you can also move the shoulder pads decently freely so they don't get too much in the way, which is better than the guts because of how that body was structured. He's got a double bend at the elbow, as well as a ball hinge at the wrist. There is an upper arm swivel, and both arms being asymmetrical, they do carry mostly the same articulation, which is good. It's mainly just the shoulder pads that are different. And there is a proper butterfly joint inside Griffith, so you can get some pretty good bends. There is a ball joint in the upper chest, which allows for a little bit of side-to-side rotation and a tiny bit of ab crunch. The sheath on his side is flexible, can bend around pretty easily. He can kick up that far and bend his knees pretty deeply, which is fantastic. The feet are on a hinge, and there is a toe bend, as well as a thigh swivel. And that's effectively it. It's nothing too crazy, but I do feel like it's better than the Guts posability, because so much of Guts's posability was limited because of the sculpt, or because there was too much going on design-wise, that something would grind into something and you need to move it out of the way, or it can't move out of the way, and he's just an incredibly restrictive figure, or a very fiddly figure to get into the right pose. Whereas Griffith, there's not as much going on, at least for a base figure, so he can get into dynamic poses, he can bend deeply, he can sort of pivot in the right direction and get what you need out of him without too much effort. It is a bit of a different story once the cape's on, once his sword hilt is in the sheath, or if he's holding a weapon, and it is also a different story when he's riding the horse. But generally, he is a bit less fiddly, and I feel a bit more confident moving him around. Now, Griffith comes with a couple of faces, so he's got a neutral face out of the box. He's got a slight smile, which I think is probably his best face. It's just a tiny bit sinister, you don't know what's going on behind those eyes. And he also comes with a face for his helmet, so takes a little bit of assembly of taking apart the helmet, but you basically just slot the head in, and it looks like a face with something attached to it. So he's got a little bit of hair peeking out from the helmet, and it just slots in nicely and looks clean. It is a very neutral face, but I think it works quite well, especially because the helmet does add a little more options, because you can have the visor up or down, and it does change the entire aesthetic of the figure. That also requires a different hairpiece at the back, and it is sort of like tapered off at the connecting point, so it doesn't really get in the way of the helmet that much. But when you're posing it with the cape, it can sort of pop off the hair, pop off the head, pop off the cape. It's a little bit awkward, but not too bad. But I do really, really like the aesthetic of Griffith with the helmet. It really looks good. I just like the hawk style armor, and the helmet is such a unique silhouette. And when you match him with the horse and connect the reins, which are very, very annoying to put in, he does look really good. It is a bit of a shame that the horse cannot move at all. It's just a static object, and most poses on a horse would have to be dynamic, and they even sort of show that on the back of the box, and it's all general visual trickery. And it still looks nice, but it feels kind of useless, honestly. Like, I would probably prefer a version without the horse, like a DX or a standard version, because the horse just really doesn't add anything to this figure, if I'm being completely honest. It looks nice, and that's about it. But I can't deny that Griffith doesn't look cool with his sword drawn on the horse, but again, it just feels a bit unnecessary. But when you combine all his accessories together, you do get a good amount of options from Griffith, especially because he's not as heavy as Guts and the joints are nice and solid, that he can hold a pose pretty well without the assistance of a stand. But I still, again, would recommend having a stand just because it will give you that little extra security. But he is just a pretty good figure with good options. Something as simple as the way the helmet works, by being able to slot in and out a face, allows you to have like 3 separate options of how the helmet works, because you can have him wearing the helmet, you can have the visor up or down, or you can empty the helmet out completely and just have it as a hollow sort of husk that Griffith can hold at his side. And I think that that's just such a good option. It is something that I believe the Figma could do as well, but I do think it's sort of necessary to the character. It just works really, really well for Griffith. It just works really, really well for Griffith. And while he doesn't have a lot of faces and doesn't have a lot of hands and his accessories are fairly standard-ish, I think it is definitely what you need out of it, similar to the Guts, where it's got just about everything you could want for that sort of figure, and the options are pretty good even if they might seem a bit light. And I guess the only thing they could have really done is add a few new hand options or a couple more faces, but generally I think this captures Griffith just fine. Again, I do think they should have had sort of like a standard version without the horse, because it does feel incredibly unnecessary. This is a much better figure than Guts, but the price point on it because of the horse is pretty insane. But I do hope it's a sign of things to come, and with the Berserker Armor transformed version coming out early next year, I do think we'll get a much better figure in that, because the Guts sculpt itself was quite good. It was just hindered by all the tiny accessories getting in the way, and the transformed version seems to have addressed that completely. And with some tighter joints at the wrists, I think we'll have an amazing figure on our hands when that drops, as well as all the teasers of upcoming Berserk figures as well. But that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed that video, and I will see you all next time.